Hi everyone, my name is Mark, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Anggy Diaz first met Jared Dicus when she was working at Chepe's Meat Market, a local grocery store and taqueria in Texas. At the time, Anggy was a hard-working 21-year-old immigrant from Nicaragua who had come to the United States with hopes of building a better life for herself and her family. Jared, also 21, had recently started working at the same establishment, and it wasn't long before the two young people found themselves drawn to each other. Anggy couldn't help but notice Jared's friendly demeanor and apparent dedication to his work. As the eldest of 4 siblings, she had always been responsible and mature beyond her years, qualities that seemed to complement Jared's more easygoing personality. Their initial conversations during work breaks were filled with easy laughter and shared stories about their dreams for the future. What particularly appealed to Anggy was Jared's apparent stability and his willingness to work hard alongside her. For Anggy, who had left everything she knew in Nicaragua, meeting someone who seemed genuinely interested in her and her dreams felt like a blessing. She had sacrificed tremendously by leaving her homeland, driven by her deep love for her family and her determination to support her mother, who was battling cancer back home. The thought of having someone to share this challenging journey with filled her with hope and optimism. As time passed, Anggy and Jared's workplace friendship quickly blossomed into something deeper. They discovered they enjoyed spending time together outside of work, sharing meals and talking about their plans for the future. To those around them, they appeared to be a young couple, genuinely in love, navigating the challenges of building a life together in America. Their relationship seemed filled with promise and the kind of mutual support that many couples aspire to achieve. What made their connection particularly meaningful to Anggy was the way Jared seemed to understand her dedication to her family. She had always been driven by her desire to provide for her loved ones, especially her mother, who desperately needed financial support for her cancer treatment. Anggy was working multiple jobs, demonstrating an incredible work ethic that impressed everyone who knew her. She had recently achieved something she was incredibly proud of: becoming a fitness coach, a goal she had worked tirelessly to accomplish. To the outside world, Anggy and Jared appeared to be building something beautiful together. Their co-workers at Chepe's Meat Market often commented on how happy Anggy seemed when she was with Jared. Her boss, Veronica Jimenez, later recalled how Anggy would light up when talking about her boyfriend, describing her as very happy with her husband during the early days of their relationship. However, as their relationship progressed towards something more serious, subtle signs began to emerge that not everything was as perfect as it appeared on the surface. Those closest to Anggy began to notice slight changes in her demeanor, though at the time, these shifts seemed minor and easily explainable by the normal stresses of work and life. It was only a matter of time before Jared decided to propose to Anggy. The proposal came after months of dating, and Anggy was thrilled to accept. For her, marriage represented not only a personal milestone, but also a sense of security and partnership that would help her continue supporting her family back in Nicaragua. The engagement period was filled with excitement and planning, as the young couple looked forward to officially beginning their life together. On October 22, 2022, Anggy and Jared celebrated their love in a wedding ceremony. The local Waller County judge, Trey Duhan, who performed the ceremony, would later describe them as a very nice young couple. Their special day seemed to mark the beginning of what should have been a happy and fulfilling marriage. Friends and family gathered to celebrate the union of two people who appeared deeply committed to each other and ready to face life's challenges together. After their wedding, Anggy and Jared made the decision to move into a small cabin located on the property belonging to Jared's parents in the 200 block of Oak Hollow Boulevard in Waller County, Texas. This arrangement provided them with affordable housing, while they worked to establish their financial foundation as a married couple. For Anggy, who continued to work diligently to send money back to Nicaragua, this living situation seemed practical and beneficial. Anggy remained committed to her work ethic, continuing her employment at Chepe's Meat Market, while also pursuing her fitness coaching career. Her manager, Ruth Armendariz, consistently praised Anggy's dedication and positive attitude. Those who worked alongside her described her as a very bright girl who was full of energy and never negative. She was known for her ambitious nature and the many goals she had set for her life. However, as the weeks following their wedding passed, cracks began to appear in what had seemed like a perfect relationship. While Anggy maintained her cheerful public demeanor, her boss, Veronica Jimenez, began to notice subtle changes. There were days when she was different, Jimenez would later recall. She was tired, but I wasn't sure if she was tired because of her job or because of her relationship. The first major warning sign came just a month into their marriage when Jared was arrested for driving under the influence. The incident occurred around 2 a.m. at a Whataburger restaurant where employees had called police after Jared became aggressive and repeatedly tried to force his way into the dining room. The officers who responded to the call described him as so belligerent that they locked him out of the establishment. When police searched Jared's vehicle, they discovered a 3/4 full bottle of Bud Light. During questioning, Jared admitted to officers that he was also on pills, though he claimed he couldn't identify what medication he had taken. This behavior was concerning not only because of the legal implications, but also because it revealed a side of Jared that Anggy may not have fully understood before their marriage. The DWI arrest was particularly troubling because of how Jared behaved during the booking process. According to court records, Jared threatened both the arresting police officer and members of the Montgomery County Jail staff. His behavior became so disruptive that he began punching windows, ultimately requiring officers to place him in a restraint chair for everyone's safety. This violent outburst demonstrated a pattern of aggressive behavior that would later prove to be deeply significant. As Anggy and Jared's marriage continued, friends and family members began to notice additional concerning signs. Those close to Anggy observed that while she had initially been very happy in her relationship, something seemed to have shifted after the wedding. Friends who saw her at social gatherings noted that she appeared different, though she never explicitly complained about her marriage or asked for help. One particularly telling incident occurred at a Christmas party in December 2022. Less than a month before Anggy's death. According to friends who were present, the couple left the party abruptly, with Jared appearing visibly upset. Everyone was having a good time, and he left looking really upset, one friend later recalled. This behavior seemed unusual and concerning to those who witnessed it, though they had no way of knowing how serious the underlying problems had become. During this time period, law enforcement had already been called to the couple's residence multiple times for domestic disturbance reports, while Waller County Sheriff Troy Guidry would later state that these calls were nothing to this effect and to this level of violence. Compared to what would eventually happen, they represented a clear pattern of conflict and tension within the marriage. One of Anggy's unnamed friends later revealed to the New York Post that Jared exhibited concerning possessive behavior during their marriage. The friend described him as a jealous person and recalled a particularly disturbing social media post where Jared had written, "She is mine." According to the friend, this post was weird because no one was questioning that. It was out of nowhere. This type of possessive language and behavior is often considered a significant red flag in relationships and can indicate potential for escalating domestic violence. Despite these warning signs, Anggy appeared to remain committed to her marriage. Her friends later reflected that she may have been embarrassed to admit that her relationship wasn't perfect. She never said there were any problems. Maybe she was just embarrassed to admit her relationship wasn't perfect, one friend observed. This reluctance to seek help or openly discuss relationship problems is unfortunately common among domestic violence victims, who often feel shame or believe they can handle the situation on their own. What made Anggy's situation particularly heartbreaking was her continued dedication to her family in Nicaragua, despite the challenges she was facing in her marriage. She was working 2 jobs specifically to help pay for her mother's cancer treatment, demonstrating the selfless love and commitment that defined her character. Her work colleagues at Chepe's Meat Market and Taqueria knew her as someone who was always thinking of others and working toward goals that would benefit not just herself, but her entire family. As January 2023 began, the tensions in Anggy and Jared's marriage appeared to be escalating. While the exact details of their private conversations and conflicts remain unknown, it was clear that whatever issues had been simmering beneath the surface were reaching a dangerous boiling point. The young woman who had come to America with such hope and determination was trapped in a marriage that had become increasingly dangerous and unstable. On January 11th, 2023, surveillance footage would later show Jared visiting the store where Anggy worked around 11:40 in the morning. The video captured him entering the establishment, grabbing a beer, and then leaving without paying. Even more disturbing was the footage showing him opening the beer and drinking it before getting back into his car. This behavior was not only illegal, but also suggested that Jared was in an unstable mental state, possibly preparing for or processing what was about to unfold. The significance of this surveillance footage cannot be overstated. It showed a man who appeared to be acting erratically and making poor decisions in the hours leading up to what would become one of the most horrific crimes in Waller County's recent history. The casual nature of his theft, combined with his decision to consume alcohol in his vehicle, painted a picture of someone whose judgment was severely impaired and whose behavior was becoming increasingly dangerous. What happened next would forever change the lives of two families and shock the entire community of Waller County. The events that unfolded on the afternoon of January 11th, 2023 would demonstrate just how quickly a troubled marriage could escalate into unspeakable violence. On the afternoon of January 11th, 2023, at approximately 4:35 p.m., Jared's parents made a phone call that would forever change their lives and the lives of everyone connected to this tragic case. They dialed 911 to report a possible death on their property, specifically in the small cabin behind their main house where their son and daughter-in-law had been living. According to Sheriff Troy Guidry's later statements, it was Jared's father who immediately called police after discovering what had happened. The parents had apparently been prompted to check the cabin after Jared came into their main house and made some type of disturbing statement that caused them significant concern for Anggy's welfare. When Waller County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the scene, they were confronted with what Sheriff Guidry would later describe as a gruesome scene at best. Inside the small cabin, they discovered Anggy's lifeless body near the bed, surrounded by a scene of incredible violence and brutality. The 21-year-old had suffered multiple stab wounds to her back, and the extent of the violence was almost incomprehensible. The scene was gruesome, with blood splattered throughout the residence. According to court documents, Anggy was found on the floor near the bed in a pool of blood with multiple stab wounds in her back. Even more horrifying was the discovery that what appeared to be the head of the victim to be in the shower. The level of violence and brutality displayed in this crime was so extreme that it shocked even the most experienced law enforcement officers who responded to the scene. Crime scene investigators determined that a kitchen knife had been used in the attack. Sheriff Guidry later confirmed that everything happened on the property, and all parts and pieces were recovered and submitted for evidence. The methodical nature of the violence and the fact that Anggy's body had been dismembered indicated a level of brutality that was difficult for investigators to comprehend. When deputies arrived at the scene, they found Jared still present at the property. Rather than fleeing or attempting to hide what had happened, he remained at the location where he had committed this horrific crime. Both Jared and his parents were taken into custody for questioning, though it quickly became clear that Jared was the sole perpetrator of this violent act. During the initial police interview, Jared provided what Sheriff Guidry described as a full confession, admitting to the murder of his wife. The confession was straightforward and unambiguous. Jared acknowledged that he had killed Anggy in their shared home. However, what he did not provide was any clear explanation or motive for why he had committed such a brutal and senseless act of violence. The confession sent shockwaves through the community and left investigators struggling to understand what could have driven a 21-year-old man to commit such a heinous crime against the woman he had married just 3 months earlier. The randomness and brutality of the violence seemed to contradict everything that people thought they knew about Jared and his relationship with Anggy. As news of the crime spread throughout Waller County and beyond, the community struggled to process what had happened. Sheriff Guidry attempted to put the tragedy into perspective during a press conference, stating, "That's the world we live in today. It's a gruesome scene. Both sides of these families will be altered by it." His words captured the profound impact that this crime would have not only on the immediate families involved, but on the entire community. The investigation that followed would reveal additional disturbing details about the events of January 11th, 2023. Investigators determined that the attack had been particularly brutal, with evidence suggesting that Anggy had fought desperately to save her life. The multiple stab wounds to her back indicated that she may have been trying to flee or defend herself when the attack occurred. What made this crime even more heartbreaking was the realization that Anggy had been living in fear during the final weeks of her life. The previous domestic disturbance calls to the residents suggested that tensions had been building for some time, but no one had anticipated that the situation would escalate to such a violent and deadly conclusion. For Anggy's family in Nicaragua, the news of her death was devastating beyond words. The young woman who had left her homeland to build a better life and support her family's medical expenses had instead become the victim of an unthinkable tragedy. Her mother, who was already battling cancer, now had to process the loss of her eldest daughter in addition to her own health struggles. The crime scene investigation continued for several days as law enforcement officers meticulously collected evidence and attempted to piece together exactly what had happened in the cabin that afternoon. The physical evidence painted a clear picture of the violence that had occurred, but the psychological and emotional factors that had led to this tragedy remained largely unexplained. As Jared was formally charged with murder and held in the Waller County Jail, the community began to grapple with the reality that domestic violence could escalate to such extreme levels without more obvious warning signs. While there had been previous calls to the residents and concerning behavior from Jared, no one had predicted that the situation would end in such a brutal and senseless murder. The investigation into Anggy's death also revealed the broader context of her life and the dreams that had been so cruelly cut short. Friends and colleagues shared stories of her ambition, her dedication to her family, and her recent pride in becoming a fitness coach. These details made her death even more tragic, as they highlighted the bright future that had been stolen from her and the positive impact she had been making on those around her. As the legal process began, the community continued to search for answers about what had driven Jared to commit such a horrific act against the woman he had promised to love and protect. The investigation would eventually reveal additional concerning details about Jared's mental state and behavior leading up to the crime, but the fundamental question of why this tragedy occurred would remain partially unanswered. With Jared in custody and having confessed to the crime, the focus shifted to the legal proceedings that would determine his fate. However, no amount of justice could undo the terrible loss that had occurred or ease the pain of those who loved Anggy and had hoped for so much more from her life in America. The case immediately raised serious questions about domestic violence, mental health issues, and the systems in place to protect vulnerable individuals. While Jared had been arrested for DWI just months earlier and had displayed concerning violent behavior during that arrest, there had been no mechanism to prevent him from continuing to pose a threat to Anggy. Following Jared's arrest and confession, investigators began a thorough examination of his background and mental state to try to understand what had led to this tragic outcome. During the pre-trial phase of the case, significant concerns were raised about Jared's mental health and his competency to stand trial. The Waller County Criminal District Attorney's Office acknowledged that potential mental health issues were raised regarding the defendant's competency to stand trial. This development suggested that there might have been underlying psychological factors that contributed to the crime, though it also raised complex questions about accountability and justice. A court-ordered psychiatric examination was conducted to determine whether Jared was mentally competent to understand the charges against him and assist in his own defense. After a thorough evaluation, the examining psychiatrist determined that despite any mental health issues he might have been experiencing, Jared was indeed competent to stand trial. This finding meant that the legal proceedings could move forward and that Jared would be held fully accountable for his actions. Initially, Jared was held on a $500,000 bond, but Waller County Criminal District Attorney Sean G. Whitmore argued that this amount was insufficient given the severity and nature of the crime. Whitmore petitioned the court to increase the bond to $1 million, citing the heinous nature of Anggy's murder and Jared's history of violent behavior. The district attorney's argument was strengthened by details from Jared's previous arrest, which had occurred just 2 months before Anggy's murder. During that DWI arrest, Jared had threatened police officers and jail staff, demonstrating a pattern of violent and unpredictable behavior when under stress or influence. This prior incident was seen as evidence that Jared posed a significant public safety risk and flight risk. After hearing arguments from both the prosecution and defense, the judge agreed to raise Jared's bond to the requested $1 million amount. The judge also ordered an additional mental health evaluation for Jared, ensuring that all aspects of his psychological state would be thoroughly examined before the case proceeded to trial. As the legal process continued, Waller County District Attorney Sean G. Whitmore began working closely with Anggy's family to understand their wishes and concerns regarding the prosecution of Jared. The family, who were dealing with their own grief and trauma while also managing the logistics of bringing Anggy's remains back to Nicaragua, expressed their desire to see justice served while also avoiding a prolonged and painful trial process. Prosecutors and defense attorneys began discussing the possibility of a plea agreement that would resolve the case without requiring a trial. Such an agreement would need to ensure that Jared received a significant prison sentence while also sparing Anggy's family the additional trauma of having to testify about the details of her death and their relationship. The negotiations were complex as they had to balance the severe nature of the crime with practical considerations about the legal process and the wishes of the victim's family. Prosecutors wanted to ensure that any plea agreement would result in a sentence that reflected the heinous nature of the crime, while also providing some measure of closure for those who loved Anggy. Throughout this period, the community continued to struggle with the implications of what had happened. Domestic violence advocates used the case to highlight the importance of recognizing warning signs and providing support to those who might be in dangerous relationships. The fact that law enforcement had been called to the residence multiple times before the murder served as a reminder that domestic violence often escalates gradually before reaching a deadly conclusion. On July 31st, 2024, more than a year after Anggy's death, Jared James Dicus appeared before District Court Judge Gary Cheney to enter a plea agreement that would resolve the case. In a development that brought some measure of closure to Anggy's family and the community, Jared pleaded guilty to the murder of his wife. The plea agreement resulted in Jared being sentenced to 40 years in prison in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, Institutional Division. As part of the agreement, Jared waived his right to appeal the verdict and sentence, and he also waived any potential defenses, including an insanity defense. Additionally, he waived any post-conviction writs of habeas corpus, meaning that his options for challenging the conviction and sentence in the future would be extremely limited. Under the terms of the sentence, Jared will not be eligible for parole until at least 2043, ensuring that he will spend decades behind bars for his crime. However, as District Attorney Whitmore noted, eligibility for parole is not an automatic grant of parole, meaning that Jared could potentially serve even longer if parole is denied when he becomes eligible. The plea agreement was reached only after extensive consultation with Anggy's family, who were made aware of all the terms before the agreement was finalized. The family's input was crucial in ensuring that the resolution of the case honored Anggy's memory while also providing them with the closure they needed to begin healing from their loss. During the sentencing hearing, the impact of Anggy's death on her family and community was clearly evident. District Attorney Whitmore emphasized the broader implications of the case, stating, "Waller County does not tolerate domestic violence. Heinous crimes like this one will not go unanswered. We will seek justice for the victims of domestic violence and send a message to the perpetrators that here we fight for our victims. The district attorney also expressed gratitude to the Waller County Sheriff's Office for their thorough investigation and their service to the victim's family and the community. The collaborative effort between law enforcement and prosecutors had ensured that justice was served while also respecting the wishes and needs of those most affected by the tragedy. For Anggy's family, the conclusion of the legal proceedings represented both an end and a beginning. While nothing could bring back their beloved daughter and sister, the knowledge that Jared would be held accountable for his actions provided some measure of justice. However, they also faced the ongoing challenge of rebuilding their lives while carrying the weight of their loss. The case also served as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of domestic violence and the importance of taking warning signs seriously. The multiple police calls to the residents, Jared's previous violent behavior during his DWI arrest, and the concerning possessive behavior that friends had observed all represented missed opportunities to intervene before the situation escalated to murder. In the aftermath of the sentencing, community organizations and domestic violence advocates used Anggy's story to educate others about the warning signs of an abusive relationship and the resources available to those who might be in danger. Her death became a catalyst for important conversations about how to better protect vulnerable individuals and prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. The resolution of the case also highlighted the complex intersection of mental health issues and criminal responsibility. While Jared's mental health concerns had been acknowledged during the legal process, the court ultimately determined that he was competent to stand trial and fully responsible for his actions. This outcome reinforced the principle that mental health struggles, while they may provide context for criminal behavior, do not excuse or justify acts of violence. As Jared began serving his sentence, Anggy's family continued their efforts to honor her memory and support others who might be facing similar challenges. They worked with community organizations to raise awareness about domestic violence and to ensure that Anggy's story would serve as both a warning and an inspiration for positive change. The case of Anggy Diaz and Jared Dicus serves as a tragic reminder of how quickly a relationship can turn deadly and how important it is for communities to take domestic violence seriously. While the legal system provided justice in this case, the ultimate goal must be prevention, ensuring that other young women like Anggy are protected before they become victims of such senseless violence. The memories of Anggy shared by those who knew her paint a picture of a young woman full of hope, ambition, and love for her family. Her tragic death at just 21 years old represents not only a personal loss for her loved ones, but also a loss for the entire community. The dreams she had for her life, her dedication to supporting her family, and her recent achievements as a fitness coach all serve as reminders of the bright future that was stolen from her. In the end, Anggy Diaz will be remembered not as a victim of domestic violence, but as a hard-working, ambitious young woman who came to America seeking a better life for herself and her family. Her legacy serves as a call to action for all of us to do better in recognizing the warning signs of domestic violence and protecting those who may be in danger. As District Attorney Whitmore concluded, we will seek justice for the victims of domestic violence and send a message to the perpetrators that here we fight for our victims. Anggy's case demonstrates both the importance of that fight and the tragic consequences when violence is allowed to escalate unchecked. Her memory will continue to inspire efforts to prevent similar tragedies and to support those who need help escaping dangerous relationships.